Everybody, Mike Jeffers, Chicago Jazz Magazine, ChicagoJazz.com, and welcome to another episode of Around Town. I know I've been on a little bit of a hiatus, but I've had a lot of huge projects going, which I'm going to get into in another video another time. But we are back doing Around Towns here, leading into the Chicago Jazz Fest. And I am with Markus Rutz, of course, Chicago trumpeter and composer extraordinaire that everyone knows here in town, and Brice Winston, who is, well, we'll get into his career a little bit more in another recording, but he's actually in town recording with Markus. They're longtime friends as well. But Brice, you might know that name. He longtime staple with the Terence Blanchard band and a myriad of other well-known national and international artists. So it's great to have both of them on today. Guys, thanks for being on, and welcome to Around Town.
Thanks for having us. Thanks, Mike.
For sure. So Markus, let's just touch on one item before we bring both of you back into this. But you just came out with an EP, Penumbra. If I said that correct, I'm in business. Penumbra came out in July. It's a 4-tune EP. It's up on YouTube, on SoundCloud, on all the iTunes, everywhere else, I'm sure. Talk a little bit about that recording, and then we're going to get into the recording that you and Brice are working on this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. So Penumbra and the recording project that we're doing now are really kind of in the same thought space and time period where I was writing music last year, especially last 2 years, but then in particular last year and last fall. And Penumbra itself, there's 4 tunes on it. It is an EP. Actually, this is the download card of it, the photograph, which is done by a friend of mine who runs a coffee shop in West Loop called VF5, and he's a fantastic photographer from another career. But in any case, Penumbra, the concept and hopefully the photograph kind of depicts it is, let's say a concept of, finding light within darkness. And Penumbra is essentially an eclipse. So, it's dark, but there's still light there. You got to search for the light. That's the idea of it.
Well, and you came up with 4 tunes. I mean, it's an EP, which I love because in this day and age, and Brice probably knows better than both of us because he's on so many recordings and has played with so many different artists around the country that, these days I don't see a lot of people buying specific CDs and running from one tune to the other, like probably all of us listened to when we were coming up in the music business. But now it's like single, and nobody really puts everything together. So I love the fact that you just did 4 tunes and you drop them, and then they're all available on YouTube and everything. It's kind of like a brand builder, but it also gets your name out there and also gets your music out there, I think, a lot more efficiently these days.
Yeah, I mean, that's another benefit of it. Some of the music, it's just kind of too much for one session. And even with the project that's in place right now, there are 10 tunes essentially, and over 2 days. We did one last week with Sherelle Cassidy in the saxophone chair, and then this one is the second half of it. But with modern technology of digital, space, you don't necessarily are confined with the CD time frame, and also just viability of CDs essentially.
Yeah, well, CDs or even vinyls and everything else coming back. I mean, the sound is great, but I think a lot of people first find the music or find the artists on YouTube or on iTunes or Spotify and everywhere else, and then they hear a tune and then maybe they'll go check it out. But so Brice, talk a little bit about, before we get into the recording, you're in town to play with Markus. Now you played with Nicholas Payton, actually. I know you were in New Orleans, and then you played with Terence Blanchard, one of my favorite guys. And by the way, I had him on the cover of Chicago Jazz Magazine years ago when he was on the Chicago Jazz Fest. And then I had him in my booth signing autographs and selling CDs. And he came in the booth and literally stayed there for like 4 hours, talked to everybody, kissing babies, shaking hands. Everybody in the world knew him. And the city police actually came and shut my booth down because they had to close the park because he stayed way past the fest and just kept going. So just a wonderful dude, awesome player, obviously, and a genius composer. And, so talking a little bit about Markus's new recording and talking about the music business a little bit, I mean, without getting way into it, because I really want to bring you back on so we can talk a lot about your background and stuff, but playing with somebody like Markus, recording with somebody like Markus, and then recording with all the other artists that you performed with, you bring that extra element into the music that I think is really interesting, because if Markus is using a lot of people in the Midwest, you bring that element of all that experience you have. When you're looking at some of Markus's compositions and you're jumping on these recordings, how do you go about preparing to kind of take on some of that and go into a recording studio and start playing with the group?
That's an interesting question. I guess for me, I'm always looking to figure out where Markus is at and what his vision is and help him kind of realize that vision for himself. I feel like that's kind of my job as a sideman. But at the same time, like I'm representing myself and my sound. So I'm kind of bringing my sound to his vision, but I definitely want to defer to whatever his vision is for the project and help realize that as best as possible.
I would imagine that, and I know I've known Markus for years, so I already know the answer to this, but he probably, when he puts a group together and you guys are in a recording studio, the reason why he hired everybody and brought everybody in, is collaborating with everybody, is because he wants that input to take his composition and his thought process to another level. Now, when you're working with somebody like Terence Blanchard or Herbie Hancock or any of them, and you're in a recording studio and they're bringing in new compositions, is that openness there for some of those guys too, where they're bringing you in, they're taking your input and saying, yeah, okay, Brice, maybe you're right. Maybe we'll add a little of this or do this or this, or is it fairly structured when they come in because they've got kind of a completed, composition that they want to hear it a certain way?
I would say that both of the guys that you mentioned, both Terrence and Herbie, they ask people to be a part of what they do because of who they are and what they can bring to a project. And I mean, Terrence and I talked about that a lot actually over the number of years that we worked together. Just him creating a space which allowed people to grow into themselves and realize who they are as artists. So, I was in that band for quite a long time, and there were a lot of different incarnations of that band. And he always hired people and let them do what it is they were good at doing and grow into themselves. And so the band always ended up being so much greater than the sum of its parts just because of that. He allowed people to be artists and wanted them to explore their own artistry. So yeah, both of those guys were just like that. Herbie produced one of Terrence's records and also played on that record, and so it was really inspiring and educational, as you can imagine, just to have both of them around. And yeah, I guess they just really want to hire people that are not afraid of becoming the artists that they're destined to be.
Well, and that also takes the creative process to another level too, because you're, as a composer, writing something a certain way and you're hearing it a certain way in your head, and then when you bring it in and you have other people hear it, that's sort of like the whole process of being an artist, right? Is where you collaborate and then you can take your creativity to another level because of the people you have around you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was in Terrence's band, he encouraged us to bring in original music, and exactly like you said, you imagine it a certain way, and then you have these unbelievable musicians that are playing it and brought it to places that I could never imagine, and it made it so much more interesting and greater than I ever could have, devised on my own.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the whole part of being an artist and being collaborative and working together and everything. And that's why, Markus, now you've got this new recording that you're putting out. When do you think you're going to release it? I know Brice is in town. You guys are recording kind of the final version, final tunes, I think, on this recording. Is it another EP? When do you think it's going to be released? And do you have a name for it yet? When,
I have an idea.
give everybody a tease here that's watching this, Markus. It's your
Sure,
sales
yeah.
pitch.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. No, absolutely. I do have an idea, a few ideas for a name kind of concept. It's based around time. I mean, it's essentially a recording that has like ties into different time because as we are going through time and aging, and there's only a certain amount of time there. So we want to make the best of it, and that's kind of the idea of it. So one of the tunes on it is called Many Moons. It's an original that I wrote, and actually we're speaking of like Bryce's tunes and bringing them into his sessions. We're actually playing one of his tunes called Time to Spare, and that I've heard him play with Terence in various locations. I mean, Symphony Center and other places where they just blow it, sky high. It's just beautiful.
Who else is on the recording? Talk a little bit about who else is going to be recording on this one.
Yeah, the drum chair is Gregory Archery for both sessions.
Yeah.
Adrian Ruiz, my longtime musical partner, is on piano. The bass player for the sessions differs. So Christian Dillingham, that was on the first one last week on Monday, and Samuel Peters will be on one tomorrow. And then Matt Gold is gracing the recording on both sessions, which is wonderful, guitarist. And then obviously Brice tomorrow, and then previously last Monday was Sherelle Cassidy again.
Oh, that's awesome, man. So rootsmusicworks.com. We'll send everybody over there. And Brice, when I have you back on, I know you're really into the educational field now. You're in Arizona, you're based out of there. You started an institute down there, a music institute, and I want to get all way into that. But just for some of the younger players and some of the people that are watching this that are musicians that are learning, because I have a lot of students that watch these videos as well as accomplished musicians. Talk a little bit about how important it is, because as a musician yourself coming up and playing with all of these greats, I always found that when I met all of these different incredible musicians, well-known, famous musicians, 99% of them would stop and want to sit and talk to young students because they want to pass the music on. So is that something that you learned and it kind of got ingrained by being around all these guys and helped you kind of give that inspiration to start your institute?
I think that's definitely part of it. I did want to give back to my community that that I grew up in, and there was just a great model in New Orleans, the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts, that I was just around for all the time that I was living in New Orleans, and then I ended up doing some teaching there. I just saw it as such an inspiring model for inspiring young people. So I wanted to do something like that in Tucson. And when I moved back there after Hurricane Katrina, there were already some educational programs there that I kind of hooked into. And then we created this school that was separate from those existing entities, which were kind of fading out. So it was partially about helping recreate this vision of what New Orleans had to offer, but then also giving back to my community that, I felt I had gotten so much positive things from.
Yeah, well, congratulations on doing that. And, I used to teach a lot, and I would always say that you can inspire so many people because they might be interested in all these different genres, but when you actually sit down and if you're interested and you're a musician and you listen to jazz and you have somebody actually explaining it to you and showing you how to do it, you become an instant fan, and then you get motivated, and then you can play anything that you want. So, I mean, that's why I think education is so important. Okay, guys, thank you so much for jumping on today. By the way, Brice, I have to say this. Terence Blanchard in 1991 played at the Jazz Showcase in Chicago at the Blackstone Hotel. You weren't in the band yet, but it was during the Malcolm X movie and all that stuff. And he came in and did something I still remember, and it was like the most incredible thing I ever saw in my entire existence. He just walks in with the band, they sit down, legendary Jazz Showcase, and he just goes, "This is the Malcolm X Jazz Suite Part 1." And they played the entire soundtrack through jazz-wise, because I had only heard it on the movie. It was the most unbelievable. Everybody's standing there with their jaws open. They couldn't believe what they just experienced. I had never heard him do that again since then. I don't know if he still does some of that or not. Does he ever walk in and just play a whole soundtrack or something in a club? Because it's the most unbelievable thing I ever saw in my life.
We've done tours where we're doing the music of Spike Lee's movies, oftentimes with orchestra. But all the time that I was in the band, we never did a show that was from a particular soundtrack. So that sounds pretty unique and exciting.
Yeah, it was it was unbelievable. Joe Siegel, the legendary owner of the Jazz Showcase, actually didn't move. He actually watched the whole thing, which was very rare for Joe Siegel. So there you go. All right, guys, I appreciate you both being on, and congratulations, Markus, on the new recordings, and have a great recording session. And of course, everybody, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. All the information is on chicagojazz.com. And until next time, hopefully I will see you somewhere out on the scene.